Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment in our Let's Chat series for the 2022-2023 admission cycle. My name is Ashley Calabresi, and I am the Enrollment Services Assistant here at the Temerty Faculty of Medicine. We'll be hosting a series of these sessions to provide updates and tips to address some commonly asked questions regarding the MD and MD PhD programs. Through these sessions, we'll be clarifying admissions policies and providing useful information regarding the application process. I want to thank everyone for joining this webinar and submitting questions in advance of this session. If you do have any additional questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function to submit those, and we will try to get to as many as we can as time permits. In today's session, we have with us Program Manager Kendra Hawk, who I'll invite to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Ashley. My name is Kendra Hawk. I'm the Program Manager for Physician Scientist Training, but in that role, I am the person who manages the MD PhD program. So I help students while they're in the program, but I also am very involved in supporting the admissions committee for our recruitment and admissions process.
Thank you, Kendra, for agreeing to chat with me about the MD PhD program, and welcome. So we'll start with the very first question. So what is the MD PhD program?
So the MD PhD program is a combined degree program. That specifically means instead of getting an MD PhD degree, you're going to get two separate degrees. You'll get an MD degree and a PhD degree. You have to earn both of those. You don't just get them. We have admissions straight into the program. So you can apply when you apply on OMSAS, or you can apply when you are a current student, typically in first and second year. A student in the MD PhD program will always start in first year MD. And during that year, they work with our director, Nicola Jones, to explore what they're interested in for their PhD. So they will talk to her, they'll look into supervisors, they'll look into programs. And in that first year, typically they'll apply to their PhD and begin in their second year in the program. They leave the MD program behind, finish a PhD, which can take 3 to 5 years typically. And when their PhD is at least completely written, maybe not defended, they return to the MD program for second, third, and fourth year. And so they'll be just like a typical MD student in those years, focusing on the MD program. And they would apply to CARMs and apply to their specialties at that time. So it's a bit of a long haul. It's typically about 8 years to do the program. Some do it in 7, some take more than 8. I think that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another common question we always get is, what is a physician scientist? And are there other paths to being a clinical scientist? Why would someone apply through this pathway specifically?
So a clinician scientist or physician scientist, those can be used interchangeably. They are someone who's trained in both research skills and as a clinician, which means an MD. So to be a clinician scientist, you do have to have a specific amount of time in your work carved out and saved for research. Typically, the minimum would be 50%. But most clinician scientists are dedicating about 80% of their time to their lab work and 20% of their time to clinic. So that would look like a lot of different things. Nicola Jones, who is the director of the program, she actually does blocks of clinical time helping with transplants. So she'll work 2 weeks at a time. And then the rest of her time, she's not using her clinical skills. She's focusing on research and her university admin. Other clinician scientists might have a half day every week that they actually see patients in clinic. And then the rest of their time is dedicated to research. So it can be a variety of it can, like, a clinician scientist can work in many different ways, but the time that they dedicate to research is typically more than half of their week. There's lots of routes. MD PhD program isn't the only route. So sometimes students don't have any research experience when they enter MD, and then they take advantage of some of the programs that we offer during MD. There's summer research opportunities, there's a graduate diploma in health research, and they get a taste for research, and they know that they need to have this as part of their career. And so those students can finish their MD, and then there's an opportunity to do graduate work during your residency program. And they would often join something called a clinician investigator program that helps them do that and step out of residency and focus on a graduate degree and come back to residency. The MD PhD program, you might want to consider it if you already know that research is your passion. This is what you want to dedicate your life to. What it offers is a community to help you grow and build the skills that are necessary to be a successful clinician scientist. So in your 8 years, you're joining a community, you're meeting lots of future clinician scientists, and you're sharing resources, you're collaborating. We have programming within the MD PhD program that brings our students together. We have a retreat even coming up this weekend for our students, and U of T is the biggest MD PhD program in Canada. We have about 65 students in the program, and so that sort of peer relationship, peer mentorship really brings a lot to our students and really helps you launch your career as a clinician scientist.
Okay, great. And where can they take their PhD?
So an MD PhD student at U of T needs to take their PhD, do their PhD at U of T, but you can do it anywhere at U of T. So we have a lot of flexibility. We have students right now who are at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health. We have students obviously in the Temerity Faculty of Health. We have students in computer science right now, industrial engineering, and a really common place to be is biomedical engineering as well. So you can take advantage of the breadth of offerings at U of T. Our very strong School of Graduate Studies is available to you.
That's amazing. There's so many different options.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the specific requirements for admissions into the program, and how can someone apply if they're interested?
Okay, so anyone can apply to the MD PhD program. There's no extra cost involved. All you have to do is indicate on your OMSAS application that you are applying for the MD PhD program. So you need to meet all of the requirements set by the MD program. There's no way around that. And the MD program takes care of that. I'm going to look at my notes, make sure I don't miss anything here. So there are specific materials for the MD PhD program, 3 reference letters. And so those reference letters are very important. And it's really important for you to make sure that your referees are addressing the points that we want to learn about. And those points are your potential for success as a clinician scientist, your capacities to succeed in both an undergraduate medical program and a PhD curriculum, your self-starting behavior, because really you're going to need it, and any contribution to research that you were involved in, including publications, or if you plan for something to be published, you can even have your referee include that. And then, of course, your capacity to learn from others. These points are all available on our website. Ashley, I don't know if you're able to drop it in the chat, or I will near the end. So beyond the 3 letters of reference, and those are actual traditional letters, not the same as the MD references, you have to have an academic CV. Everyone needs to submit this. This is a common mistake, to forget to submit the academic CV. And the same link has a sample of what your academic CV can look like. You don't have to follow that sample, but I find it makes people's lives easier. And then a tip sheet as well. So I really recommend that if you're applying, you look at the tip sheet and you look at the sample. And then we have a short essay question, sort of similar to the other essays that you will have to write for all of your medical school applications. Our question is, reflecting on your personal and research experiences to date, how does your experience relate to your decision to pursue a physician science pathway and the kind of ideas you wish to pursue in your PhD? And that's 250 words or less. So yeah, those are the additional requirements.
Okay, great. And we have put some links in the chat for anyone that wants to do a little bit more investigating. And then, of course, always available to answer more specific questions once you've gone through all of those requirements. So I guess we'll go into the next question regarding like major due dates and important dates and how the process differs from the regular MD process.
Great, thanks, Ashley. So I think that the most important thing to keep in mind when you apply to the MD PhD program is that these processes are MD and MD PhD are parallel but completely separate. So the 2 admissions committees aren't reviewing the same materials. Our MD PhD admissions committee does not look at the materials the references, the essays, anything that you've submitted for the MD program, that is specifically for them. And likewise, the MD admissions committee does not review any of your specific MD PhD materials, like the essay, the letters of reference. So please make sure your referees know that. They often think that maybe they've covered it in another letter, but you need to think of it as a completely separate package that you're putting together. So our admission date, our important deadlines are all the same as the MD process. We do allow additional time for the submission of your academic CV, and that confuses people every year. Basically, you have to submit your application and then the opportunity to upload your CV appears after that point. And that's why we give you a little extra time in case there's some glitches on OMSAS's side. Once the MD program has assessed the GPA and MCAT scores, the basic requirements for the MD program, and sees that you've met them, we receive a list of all students who are eligible for file review and admissions to the MD PhD program. And we start our application process. So we look at your initial package of materials and we select students and invite them to an interview. MD PhD applicants who are invited to interview get an invitation that is typically will get an invitation for both your MD and your MD PhD interview at the same time. And those tend to go out a little earlier. You would get an interview admission, you would get your interview invitation by late January. Our interviews, I think it's important to point out, we've had since COVID, everyone's been needing to change their format, and we are changing our format again this year. Prior years we tried the VMPI and then some synchronous MPIs. This year we are only doing one round of interviews. We are inviting approximately 48 applicants to a synchronous MPI. So the modified personal interview format is the same as it has been in prior years for the MD PhD program. Much like you and I are talking right now, Ashley, if you're invited to the interview, you will meet with an interviewer and you will have a discussion virtually with questions, but it's synchronous, meaning that it's not going to be recorded and reviewed later. You're going to actually talk to a person in real time. That will be, the MPI format is the same, where you're rotating through interview stations. And at this point, we're not sure whether it's going to be 3 or 4 questions. But in the past, as students move through the process, we give additional information. We have had info sessions. We give you a lot of opportunity to prepare and learn about the process. So we'll do the same this year. The final change in deadlines is that our MD PhD offers are typically sent in late March. And so every year we set a common deadline with all of the MD PhD programs in Ontario, and UBC has participated in the last couple of years. We decide a date where none of the MD PhD programs can require a response to the offer by that date. It's meant to give you more options and more flexibility as an applicant. So we'll be setting that date again this year, and it will be probably late March. And so you'll have your offer typically a week or 2 before that deadline and have the opportunity to consider where you'd like to go for your MD PhD. And that's the process.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Also, super helpful to provide the timeline so that once the application closes, the applicants know when they can be expecting to hear from you. So we'll go on to the types of experience that you're looking for.
All right. So if you are going to dedicate your life to research as a clinician scientist, it's great to be passionate about research, and you should demonstrate that to the admissions committee. So you can demonstrate that through your experiences that you show on your academic CV and through your references, and of course through your essay. It is important to have research experience. If possible, there's things that you can do like enter a poster in a research day or contribute to a publication. Those are simple ways to have research experience. We evaluate undergraduate and graduate applicants differently. So don't be concerned if you're an undergrad and your major research experience is perhaps like a research course that you've taken. Maybe you're volunteering in a lab but not paid, And of course, I would hope that if you're interested in research, you would maybe opt for a major research project as one of your courses. So those are great opportunities, and we weigh your research experience differently depending on what point in your training you are. So a student who has their master's will be reviewed differently than a student who's entering from their undergrad. And I will add that we do typically admit half students coming directly from undergrad. It's not a quota or anything. We just noticed that there's a trend that out of our 8 students that we admit, about 4 are coming directly from undergrad and 4 have a master's.
Okay, great. So the next question leads actually right into that. What aspects of the application can make an undergraduate student more competitive?
So undergraduate students, I think the most important thing to do is, if you can, strategize about your references. So it's really easy to get into a really cool lab and just do all your projects in that lab. But in the end, then you're only going to have one PI or supervisor who's able to provide you with a reference. So if all possible, try and collaborate with other PIs and supervisors so that you can have 2 strong references from 2 professors at your undergraduate level. That's my biggest recommendation.
Thank you. And another question that we get a lot is regarding funding. Could you please provide more information on funding for both domestic and even international students?
Yes, definitely. So our domestic student funding, MD PhD students, as I've mentioned, they're in the program for a long time. And when you graduate, you are a researcher, you're not a doctor 100% of the time. So your salary is not going to be the same as someone who is a clinician 100% of the time, typically. So in order to encourage people to consider this pathway and make their debt burden smaller when they graduate, we do have funding all the way through the program. So our funding package for students, as long as they're in good standing, is their tuition plus incidentals, which is typically around $16,000. I think this year it's about $16,500, and an $18,000 living stipend. When students are in their graduate program, they will receive whatever the living stipend is set by that graduate program. So it's significantly higher in the Faculty of Medicine. They'll never get lower than $18,000 though. So that is our stipend. The international students get the same stipend, even though you're paying international fees. Because the MD program is a professional program, it's not considered something that can be fully funded. Excuse me. So you will receive the same Canadian $34,500 salary stipend of the students who are in your current year, but your tuition is going to be around $50,000 Canadian a year. So that's just something important to keep in mind if you're an international applicant.
Thank you. And you did mention before about references and how important that is, an important part of the component of the application. How should someone select their references for the MD PhD program? And does their referee's background or their position, does that matter as much as the capacity in which they know them?
Yeah, I think, I get emails, students asking me whether someone from a club can be their reference or different things like that. And I always just point them back to that link that we sent about what referees are asked to address, which is your potential for success as a clinician scientist. And I think that the strongest references aren't coming from your peers, they're coming from people who have trained PhD students, people who have trained clinician scientists in the past. So I think that it's best, like I said, to be strategic with your research experience so that you can get at least 2 strong references from PIs, professors. Oh, PI is now all I can think of is private investigator. It's not it's the primary investigator in a lab. Sometimes, if you're working in a big lab with a high-powered PI, you don't even really meet them that much. And so students ask, oh, can I get a PhD student to write my reference? What I suggest in those situations is that you ask the PhD student if they would mind working with the PI on your reference. and still email the PI and ask for the reference and say you've been working really closely with this PhD student and they've offered to help, and copy them on the email. Because it's important that whoever's writing the letter understands what it means to be a clinician scientist, understands what your goals are, knows that you're working towards them, because these are very, it's a very specific career. And if the PI just writes it thinking, not really understanding what's going on, and as though you're just an MD applicant, then it's just not going to be as compelling a letter, even though, they might be a Nobel Prize winner. I'm just going to make sure I didn't miss any more tips. The third reference, especially for undergraduate applicants, not everyone can have a professor or a PI for all three references. Even our graduate applicants sometimes struggle with that. So if you don't have a third, don't panic. You can be more creative with the third reference. You could use a senior member of your lab in that instance, or use a lab manager. They do see lots of students going through and can really assess your potential. You could use a supervisor from a research course. You might even have be in a seminar about research, and you could use someone like that if you feel like they could write this effective letter. I would just recommend against, like a last resort, be a professor for a class that you got a 98 in, because that isn't really the kind of reference we're looking for. So try and get someone who has some knowledge of your research passion and experience.
That's great. And we do have a lot of information on the website as well on just tips on how to choose your references, and not using anyone that is perceived as like a family member or someone that could be a conflict of interest is really important as well.
Yes. Every once in a while, I get a reference where, it might be a clinician scientist, but they start with, I've known this person since they were 2 years old. And you can't have those people be your references, I'm afraid. It's not valid, and they'll just be discounted.
Yes. So do the MD admissions committee and the MD PhD committees, do they review the same materials?
I'm sorry, I skipped ahead and I did address this earlier, but no. And I think it's good to mention it again, because where the two committees are not looking at the same materials, every year, even if you're invited to the interview process, your MD interviewers or reviewers of your VMPIs will not know that you are also competing for MD PhD program. And so it's important just to, when you're applying and interviewing for the MD program, focus on what they're looking for as a clinician specifically, and don't worry about the clinician scientist stuff. And then for the MD PhD portion of your interviews, that's when you are going to talk about your passion as an MD PhD and a clinician scientist. So these are completely separate areas. And we really trust the MD admissions committee to assess your capacity as a clinician and depend on that. Because if they say no about your MD application, you're not getting into the MD PhD program. You have to be successful in both parts of the stream.
That's great. And I think we touched on the next question as well. So how many students are selected to go into the interview stage? I guess we can reiterate that for anyone that still has questions around that.
Yeah, we have room for about 48 students because it is live. That's how we do it. And sometimes it's a little less if people have to cancel. Sometimes we do give out rolling invites if people are not able to attend and they received an invite. So we don't actually send refusals at that point when we're sending out our interview invitations. Students often wonder about that. And that's mostly because you're not refused. So you're not refused because you are still in the running for the MD program. And so that's important to keep in mind too, which I might have just skipped to another question. But when you apply to the MD PhD program, if you're not successful, you just carry on in the MD program, just like every other applicant.
For sure. Would it be possible for someone to complete the PhD portion at another university or an institution overseas, or does it have to be completed within the lab at the University of Toronto?
So you have to be a University of Toronto student for your PhD. We did have a very specific question about our joint educational placement program that's available through SGS at U of T, and that is a possibility. However, I really warn applicants against applying depending on this, because we've had several students try and it just isn't always possible. The institutions that our students are looking at, like top tier schools like Oxford and Stanford, they really, it's really difficult to get through the legal part of having this, this dual degree. They don't want to share the parchment. So it's a very complex process. You need to be happy and excited about doing your PhD at U of T if you're going to apply for this program. And if it turns out that you're able to do the JEP, the Joint Educational Placement, then that would be fabulous. You'd be the first and I'll help you do it. But yeah, it shouldn't be something that you're depending on when you consider our program.
That's great. Do you have any other updates or tips for the MD PhD program that you would like applicants to know about?
No, I mean, we're the students, we've, like everyone else, have been dealing with the virtual world the last couple of years, and our students are so excited to be meeting in person again. The community is very, very strong, very supportive, and really, they're the ones who sell it. That's why once we get into the admissions process, I will host more sessions for our applicants with our current students where they can explain, tips for interview process. If you are in the interview process, we do a sort of a promotion for our program where you learn more about it before the interviews. So watch out for that. If you are invited, we'll have more information for our additional steps.
That's great. I also want to mention our community of support program for those that are not aware of it. We offer applicant support through this initiative, and if you join community of support members, take advantage of the student application support initiative and the research application support initiative. So through the student application support initiative, we are offered guidance through the medical school application process with feedback on their application before it's submitted. So this support includes one-on-one admission advising, mentorship from medical students and physicians, and support with MCAT preparation and school-specific medical interview prep. The Research Application Support Initiative is an initiative designed to help community of support members research interests by providing information, workshops, and how to create a good academic CV. It addresses professionalism in communicating with principal investigators, what are characteristics of a good referee, etc. We help applicants develop research CVs and apply for research roles, as well as assistance with graduate applications and applications for thesis. And the Research Application Support Initiative offers a limited number of paid research roles as well. So I'll leave the information in the chat. Feel free to check it out if this sparks your interest. These are two resources that I urge you to take advantage of as you consider your next steps in your academic career.
Yeah, Ashley, the RASI program, I'm terrible with acronyms, but you just mentioned it. Research Application something initiative. It actually was started by MD PhD students to encourage applicants who are a little overwhelmed by the process, creating the CV, in order to allow them to get this research experience so that they could apply to the program. So you really should if you look at the community support, and you will meet MD PhD students through it. You can also email me if you have a particular interest. I'm happy to help with your questions or connect you with a student who maybe is doing research in your area. Everyone thinks that, they're going to be the first who want to do big data, but we do have people doing big data, or we have people working with different populations and just a huge diversity of interest. So please reach out if you want to learn more. And I also should mention actually that any applicants who are going through the BSAP or ISAP stream, they are welcome in our stream as well. You can apply to MD PhD program, and I encourage you to do so.
That's great. Yes, and I've put the link in the chat for anybody that wants to take advantage of that program. So I guess if we don't have any questions, let me see, I believe we may. So if you have any specific questions, you can reach Kendra at mdphd.program@utoronto.ca. We do have a little bit of time to answer any questions if anyone has any questions.
I see one question here. Well, there's two questions, but one is related to MD admissions. So I think you can probably email that directly to the admissions office and they can help you with it. But the question about students not continuing their PhD in the same lab that they completed their master's. Stefan, the reason for that is often that, you start your first year MD and it kind of opens your mind to what it means to be a clinician. And so students sometimes just change gears. They want to try something different. They want to, they realize that they're like passionate about public health, for instance, and they have been doing bench science in the Faculty of Medicine, and then they switched to Dalla School of Public Health doing epidemiology. Maybe they meet an MD PhD student doing some research that they didn't even know was possible. Or, there's a lot of interpersonal mentorship. Our first year students actually, every year we have a seminar series, and we ask the first year students to do like a little 10-minute presentation about themselves and their passion, just so that they can get feedback from other MD PhD students about labs they might want to consider, interesting things going on, collaborations that they could possibly make. And so that's why. It's not that they're not allowed, it's just that it's important to have a breadth of knowledge, a robust CV when you're applying for awards, and changing labs is a really great way to do that. And we have so many incredible supervisors and opportunities at U of T that even though you love your lab, there's probably another lab out there you're going to love too.
That's great. Okay, so do we have any final words, Kendra, for everyone today?
Good luck. I think it's amazing that you're considering the MD PhD program and being a clinician scientist, and also good luck with your MD applications. Remember, if you don't make it into the MD PhD program, there's still opportunities probably at every medical school, but definitely U of T, to get more research experience. You can apply again when you're in first year, or you can pursue the path at different points in your career. Once you've done your MD training, it's something you can do during residency. So all the best of luck to you, and thanks very much for listening.
Yes. I want to thank everyone who took time out of their day to join us. If you have any specific questions about the MD PhD program, please reach out to Kendra at mdphd.program@utoronto.ca. If you're considering the MD program, you can reach us at medicine.admiss@utoronto.ca. And I'll also put that email in the chat as well. And if you have any questions, we're both here to help via email at any time. Once you've went through a little bit of our website, and if you've discovered anything, we're happy to help.
Definitely. Good luck with your applications. Or if you're thinking 2 years in advance, good for you. Listen to our tips, and we'll see you at the interview process.
For sure.
Thanks so much, Ashley.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, have a great day.